Hey guys, I know it has been a while since I have come on here to give you an update as to what's going on with me. But to be honest, I wasn't really in the right headspace to share. I was going through a lot physically and emotionally in regards to my fibroid journey, and I just didn't really want to talk about it. As you can tell from the title of this video, I had a hysterectomy. I had what was called a supracervical hysterectomy. A lot of women who go through having a hysterectomy have it done vaginally. They may have the total hysterectomy, or if they have a partial, they typically lose their cervix. I've noticed on YouTube there's not a lot of women talking about this, but it is possible to keep your cervix. Along with that, I have my ovaries still there. So if I ever wanted to have a surrogate, or if I married well and we can afford having a surrogate, it is possible. So that's something to think about if, for me, in the future, if it's in his will. So, but anyway, yeah, I kept the doctor decided to keep my cervix. I did have one doctor who wanted to remove it. I went and got another opinion from another doctor I had been working with, and he felt that I did not need to lose my cervix because I have not had children. So if you haven't had children yet, there's no reason, he said, that there would be to lose your cervix because things are not stretched out down there. If they were, you run the risk of having what's called vaginal prolapse. And so that's a whole nother story. But, I really kind of was torn about that decision on what I should do. But if you have any questions for me, because I don't see a lot on YouTube about supracervical hysterectomies from people talking about it, if you have any questions about that or wonder if it could be a good option for you, I mean, obviously I'm not a doctor, but if you have any questions that maybe I can't answer about that decision that I made, feel free to include those down in the description box, down in the comment section, and I'm going to do a frequently asked questions video for any of you that may have questions for me. I wanted to come on here and just kind of update you all as to how I'm doing and what led me to this decision. For those who may be new to my channel, let me start from kind of like what my background and like what led me to this place, very quickly, just in case you don't know. So probably about 4 to 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with fibroids. I've always had an issue with irregular menstrual cycles and very heavy periods, and periods that brought about a lot of pain. That's always been an issue for me. However, I started noticing like a significant difference in my body, and even though some doctors didn't really listen to my complaints, they kind of blew it off and just said, oh, it's just menstrual cramps, no big deal. I knew that something wasn't quite right. The biggest, I guess, sign for me was I would notice that it felt at times uncomfortable to sit. So I thought that was a little strange. And then also I started feeling these like sharp pains. I was starting to feel really tired all the time, and I just didn't really understand, what was going on with my body. The doctor finally listened to me, and she sent me off for a vaginal ultrasound, and that's when they figured out that I do in fact have fibroids. They told me I had about 5, and due to the issues that I was having with the regular menstrual cycle and the pain was getting so significant, they decided to do a myomectomy. I had a myomectomy probably about maybe a few months after I was diagnosed, and they ended up finding 13 fibroids. I know, like 13, that was crazy. I also had endometriosis. From when I had the myomectomy, they removed it, and also this time they found some endometriosis as well. It also can cause a lot of pain. They went ahead and removed them, and to be honest, life was great. I was doing really well. I was feeling so much better. I was so much happier, and the hope was that one day I could still use my uterus and have children, and so that was the idea of going with the myomectomy versus any other means. Just go ahead and get rid of them and create the best environment for me to hopefully have kids. So, fast forward, I would say probably about a year or so, maybe a couple years after I had the myomectomy, I started having problems again, and the pains that I started to feel was very familiar. and I knew that my fibroids may have already grown back, or started to grow back rather. So I went ahead and scheduled an appointment, and that's when they did another ultrasound, and it did end up being the case that I had fibroids that have returned. I started also having irregular menstrual cycles again by this point. I started to get really, weak all the time, even more so than before. My levels have really dropped, as far as my hemoglobin and hematocrit, and they ended up saying that it was to the point where they thought I would need a blood transfusion. I had to go get IV infusion therapy treatment, so I had to go do that to get my levels back up, and so things just weren't going very well. I had about 7 fibroids that had grown, and it was causing me significant problems. So I just started kind of living with that for a while, and just hoping I could just go on through life and maybe it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Because some people can, go on with their life with fibroids and not have to resort to surgery. Well, things started to go from bad to worse. My menstrual cycle got to the point where it wasn't going away. By this point, I had been on about 10 different birth control pills to try to regulate my cycle. It would work for a few months, and then it would just return. And so, like I was saying, it got to the point where my period would not go away. Prior to surgery, I had been on my period over 1.5 years straight. Like, it didn't stop. Just the bleeding and the pain brought about from menstruation alone. And then you're talking about the fibroid pain that started coming along with that as well. And so things just started getting really bad. I started feeling really tired all the time. I had started getting really into health and fitness up until that point, and working out all the time. And so I started noticing that I didn't have the energy to do it. I just could not do it anymore at all. Like, I remember going to the gym one day and just kind of feeling like I can't do this. Like, I was on the treadmill and I had to stop not long after I started, and I just didn't have the energy, and I was very fit, and so I didn't know what was going on. And so that's when I started realizing, like, my quality of life was really diminishing. I went to another doctor. They ended up doing a hysteroscopy. That's when they send like a scope in and they kind of look around and see, maybe we can like figure out what fibroid is causing the biggest issue, or fibroids, and just remove those. So when they went in, they looked around and they figured out that there was a fibroid in the lining of my uterus, and so they wanted to remove that. So I ended up actually going with a different doctor because I wasn't a fan of that one. And so they both have the same recommendation, though, that I should have a hysterectomy myomectomy. And that's when they go in and they actually remove that particular fibroid, and they kind of like, laparoscopically remove that. And that didn't require an incision. So that was, just a minimally invasive method to kind of hopefully stop the bleeding, because that was, the pain was obviously a problem, but the bleeding was a problem too. And so we were hoping that that would make life better. Did that, didn't work. Time went on, still having the same issue. Bleeding hasn't stopped. Pain is getting worse. They went ahead and decided to do it again. So the reason was because he wanted to go in there and see maybe there's another one that's grown, or it's grown back. By this point, it was probably about 1 year exactly from the previous hysteroscopic myomectomy. So they went in and they saw there was in fact a fibroid in the lining of my uterus. They weren't sure if it was the same one or if a new one had, surfaced. They couldn't really tell. They just kind of went in there and, removed that one, and they were hoping that that would help. It didn't. So in fact, things continued to get worse. It was a very difficult time by that point, just due to the bleeding and the pain. I started to, lose energy even more. When I wasn't at work, I just wanted to be home. Like, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to be around a lot of people. I stopped dating because it just wasn't a party anymore. Like, I just didn't have energy, and I just started to not care. All I wanted to do was be home with my heating pad. I started to go through depression. I didn't realize it at the time, but eventually I realized that I was going through depression. because I was in pain all the time, like constantly in pain. I was suffering. I felt like I was being tortured. I mean, almost every single day, it felt like someone was stabbing me with knives in my stomach. Almost every single day, I felt like I was dragging. Almost every single day, I felt like I just didn't care and I just wanted to be by myself and wanted to be alone. I thank God for my family, for supporting me and being there for me emotionally, because I was really going through it. I haven't had children yet, and I do want to have kids biologically. So I started really going through a hard time coming to terms with what it was that I had to do in order to improve my quality of life. And so that was very, very challenging. And it was a recommendation that was made from my supervisor, actually, who went through a similar thing, and she suggested that I seek therapy. That whole process that I was going through, after a while, it weighs on you, it affects you. And sometimes you may not realize how much it's affecting you, but I knew that I wasn't myself anymore. I knew that this wasn't the normal me, I'm usually, wanting to go out, have fun, be with my friends, travel. I had so many things that, I was interested in doing in life, and I just lost interest in so many different things. So she suggested therapy because she went through that as well, and she decided to seek therapy. And that's when, I did see a therapist a few times, and it was really helpful. She wasn't the best, but she did have moments where she kind of gave me some gems, and just kind of, gave me some takeaways, and I appreciated that. She did say that she felt that I was going through depression. She called it functional depression. She said because I was still doing things that needed to be done in life. I was still doing the minimum of what needed to be done to get by, and that includes going to work, that, and aside from that's it. Like, nothing else really mattered, besides the basic needs of existing. So she said that I was going through depression, and she said no one should force me to make this decision to have the hysterectomy. And I explained to her that I knew that it was something that was going to have to happen, but I just wasn't ready to make that step. And I didn't know when I would be. I had scheduled the appointment at one time. I canceled it. Like, I just wasn't ready. And she didn't push me. She said that it should be in my time. And so her goal was to hopefully help me through that process. But one thing she did point out, which I completely agreed with when she said it, was that I was also grieving. And even though, many of us, when we think of grieving, we think of losing a loved one or something like that. But the fact that I was going to be needing to lose my uterus, and along with that, the consequence of not being able to have my own biological child, which was really important to me, she said I'm grieving that. Even though it hasn't happened yet, I'm grieving it because I know that it needed to happen. She said, right now, you're going through a grieving process, and it's going to take time, and that's okay. And so that was, a big eye-opener for me, and it kind of assured me, like, this is okay, this is normal, this is going to happen in your own time. One day, I went to work. I had put on a pad before I left for work in the morning. Went on to work, and by I want to say about 2 hours later, I pretty much bled through the pad. Blood was leaking down, it was everywhere. I'll just say that. I was wearing white pants, so it was very embarrassing. And, someone saw it, and, I went and checked, and it was terrible. It was a bad scene. I had to leave, and I could not believe how much I bled within a 2-hour time span. I was using a overnight pad, okay, like the big jumbo kind, and I bled through that. Like, that's a lot of blood, and it was coming down my leg. It was everywhere. So that was kind of what did it for me. That was the eye-opener, the cherry on the cake. I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. Like, this is not a good way to live. I can't go through life wondering if I'm going to have an accident and be bleeding through my clothes now. That was pretty much what did it. I immediately made an appointment with my doctor, and, he did try to explore other options with me, but the options did not necessarily guarantee that the pain would stop. It didn't necessarily guarantee the bleeding would stop. Hopefully the bleeding would stop, but it wasn't what he shared wasn't compelling enough to assure me that I would be without pain. And he was very honest about that. So at this point, this is surgery number what? Five that I would be embarking upon. I'm tired. Like, I'm done. I'm not living my best life anymore. And I'm tired of taking these trial surgeries and hoping that they help. So I just decided, we just need to go ahead and just do the hysterectomy. And he agreed. And so that's what we did. I'm about 4.5 weeks post-op at this point. I am doing really, really well. I'm doing really well. I don't want to get emotional on here, and I might, but I just feel very different than I thought I would today, like right now. And what I mean by that is I was scared. Like, I was really scared. When I was in the hospital the day of surgery, waiting to go through with the surgery, my family was with me. Like, I started to cry, and I was very emotional, and I didn't want to do this, like, at all. And I skipped over this, but I want to say a week before surgery, I had like a panic attack. One night I was just thinking about it and the decision that I was about to make, and I just kept saying over and over again, like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do this, and I pretty much had like a panic attack, and I've never experienced anything like that before. I don't know, it felt like it just came out the blue, but I was just really upset and just emotional every time I thought about it. I felt it wasn't fair, and I'm like, why me? Why am I going through this? What did I do to deserve this? Especially knowing that I work with kids and I help kids every day. Like, I'm a counselor and I work with elementary children and I help other people's kids, and it saddens me at the amount of cases of CPS issues that come up, and people that don't seem to appreciate the children that they have. And all I've ever wanted was children of my own. It's just waiting for the whole picture to unfold of, meeting the man and, getting married and having kids together. I've always had the desire to adopt anyway, but it meant a lot to me to have my own biological child as well. And I was looking forward to that part of my life. And I haven't met the guy, I'm not married, and dealing with the fibroids didn't help because I started losing my desire to date. And so, like, this is the longest I've been single, and it's partly my issue because for years, I haven't really been trying very hard. I haven't felt good, and I didn't want to bring someone into my world like this. And so when I thought about it, it was just upsetting. It was just like, why am I going through this? Like, why is this happening to me? I've tried to live my life right. I grew up in the church. I'm a Christian. Like, I've tried to, not be out there doing crazy stuff and be wise with my decisions. And, here I am having to make this decision to get rid of my uterus and not have kids. I had a hard time even in the hospital, and I had a wonderful doctor who really took his time to encourage me. And he even, sat on my bedside and held my hand and said that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Your uterus is not your friend. It is not your friend, and you've been fighting. You've done all that you can do, and it's, you're going to be so much happier. And even when I got into the OR and I started to get emotional again, he was right there, encouraging me as I was falling asleep, and I really appreciated that. I was so scared. Not just with complications, but, just making this decision and what it means for my life and what it could mean for dating and all of those things. And so, but I went on with it. They removed about 5 fibroids, because remember, I had 2 previously removed from the other surgeries, and they were very large. I could tell the difference in my body, and I have to say I went probably about the 2nd or 3rd day. You stay overnight in the hospital, and I did have some bleeding then, Day 1 rolled around, day 2 rolled around, and I want to say by the 3rd day or so is when it dawned on me that I wasn't bleeding anymore. And if if I could jump up and down at that moment, I would have. I obviously couldn't, but I just got emotional because I have been bleeding for so long, continuously. I mean, over a year and a half of bleeding, like, it does something to you. I mean, the amount of money that I put forth in paying for pads was ridiculous. You know, constantly needing to take birth control pills was ridiculous. And I was just really thankful, just so thankful to finally not see blood coming from my body anymore. And I have not bled since. I do understand things happen for a reason. I'm a believer in that. However, it didn't make it any easier. And all I can do is just rejoice for making it on the other side successfully, that I'm alive. I made it through surgery. I feel great. I feel amazing. I did have some concerns that kind of happened here and there. One with like frequent urination was an issue. One with, you know, some issues with the incision site, still kind of leaking when I was told it wouldn't be. Some pains that were still kind of returning when I thought I was feeling better. You know, my energy level kind of fluctuating was a concern. But things seem to kind of be leveling off now, and I am feeling really, really good. I expected to be really sad, and I'm not at all. Like, I don't know if it just hasn't sunk in yet, but when you have been bleeding for a year and a half, when you have been in pain for so many years, when you have not had energy, which my energy is still we working on that. They told me my iron is a little low still, so I'm working on that. But aside from that, like, my quality of life has already improved so much, and I'm starting to feel like me again. I'm starting to develop an interest in wanting to do things and go places and see people, and I'm still healing. I'm still getting there, but I'm feeling a lot better, and I'm totally happier, and I do not regret the decision or any of the decisions I've made up to this point. You know, it was all a journey, and for whatever reason, this is where I was led to go. And you know, it's a sad situation that I had to go through this, but I'm just a happier me, and I'm very happy to share this story with you. And for anyone who is maybe going through this, I just want to encourage you and let you know that, you know, God hasn't forgotten about you, that, you know, there's a reason for everything. And, you know, we have to look for the opportunities to be grateful for the things that we do have. I hope to have a much happier life. So, fibroid free. All right, fibroid free. Even though this is the hopefully last step of my fibroid journey, obviously, because I don't have a uterus to grow fibroids, I just wanted to let you all know that I am considering doing other things with this channel. So please stay tuned for that. You know, this channel is called Life Unexpected because even though I've gone through some bad things in my life, I've had some really great things going on in my life. For me, one of the great things that happened throughout this whole journey was I bought a home. And so I'm considering also sharing that experience with you all as well, because that was a great success that I had in my life. And it also gave me, I guess, how do I say it? It gave me something positive to hold on to while I was going through it all. And so to have this at the end of it really makes me feel very happy. I'll share some more about that as well in upcoming videos about that whole process. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below. Like I said, I'm going to do a frequently asked questions video if I get enough questions, of course. I just would rather, you know, just get right down to it, to any questions that you have specifically. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you very soon in another video. you.